Welcome to the Cross the Line podcast. My name is Carlos Smith, and today's episode is sponsored by KB's Car Care on 321 North Main Street in Jonesville, South Carolina. They offer hand car wash, vacuum, and clean interior. Full detail is also available. While you wait on your vehicle, customer seating is available as well as a dining area. They open Tuesday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., so make sure you stop by. Today's episode is also sponsored by Big Ben's Desserts. If you need to satisfy your sweet tooth, this is the place for you. They offer a wide variety of desserts, including cakes, ice cream, banana pudding, and then my personal favorite, the Oreo cheesecake. They open Tuesday to Saturday from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. and Sunday from 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. So stop by and visit Big Ben's Desserts on 297 Spartanburg Highway in Lyman, South Carolina, where nothing could be sweeter. Today we have another special episode of the Cross the Line podcast, the Self-Investment Tour edition. Of somebody that I'm happy to call a friend, a big brother, a mentor that's always taken me under his wing since I met him. He is the owner of the SuvTV here in Atlanta, Georgia. And today I had the privilege of once again sitting with Mr. Marques Burnett. How you doing?
Hey, doing great, bro.
Man, I'm good, man. Thank you for joining us again, man. For people that haven't seen this is your second time coming on. I remember this was I think the first time we did an interview was probably about 3 years ago.
I think so.
2-3 years
Maybe
ago.
Even longer, man.
Yeah, the time just been flying by.
Yeah.
So, just to let people know, I've been knowing you since, it was like right after I graduated, maybe like a year after college. I graduated in 2014. I think Coach Cox introduced me to you in 2015. So that's 7 years right there. And ever since then, man, you've always welcomed me, embraced me, taking you under your wing. So I really appreciate you for that.
Likewise, bro.
Yes, sir. So just kind of starting out, though. So I've been knowing you for 7 years. Like, how long have you actually had the SuvTV? How long have you actually been in business?
Yep, 10 years.
10 years?
Yes, sir.
And I know we were talking earlier, you are originally from Indiana,
Yep,
correct?
correct. Yep.
Talk a little bit about your background and like what was it like, growing up and being from Indiana.
Yeah, so I was from Hammond, up in that northwest corner. People always look for a landmark. So about 15 minutes from Gary, East Chicago. Chicago was 30 minutes away. Growing up there, I loved it because you got to live on the Indiana side, but you got to leverage what Chicago had to offer.
Right.
Not in the way to where we on Chicago's coattails. My wife always jokes with me about that. Our Hammond people always mention Chicago, but it's not we take pride in being from Hammond, but it means something when you can be 30 minutes away from Wrigley Field, 30 minutes away from where MJ and the Bulls created that Last Dance legacy. So it was dope growing up in that area because you were on the Indiana side, you got to experience Indiana and some of what comes from being from there. But then you still had a big city that you could leverage, when it came to everything from pro events to, shopping, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. So growing up, did you come from because you're an entrepreneur now, did you come from a family of entrepreneurs or were your parents like the traditional, like working 9 to 5?
Yeah, so I would say my parents worked, my mom worked the traditional 9 to 5. My dad was a lawyer. But he was always entrepreneurial. So aside from his legal practice, there was always, different businesses and concepts and ideas. And, even my mom was entrepreneurial. She did some catering and had different things. So I would say that entrepreneurial spirit, it was a big part of the household I grew up in. It was always a push to innovate, a push to kind of question status quo. Mm-hmm. It was just kind of built in us.
Mm-hmm. What kind of things were they kind of like fascinated you, or what did you gravitate towards growing up? Of course, definitely sports, but like, was there anything else that you kind of like were interested in growing up?
It's just like a mixture of everything, Like I love sports. I was always, a good athlete, good enough to play multiple sports. Never great in any of them. Played, baseball, basketball, tennis. But I always had interest in things like robotics and things like debate. You talk about being from Hammond. I got to shout out Hammond. We won the national championship in robotics like 4 times. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, that's a nerd accomplishment, one I'm proud of. You know what I'm saying? We had one of the best robotics teams out there. I did speech and debate, mock trials. So it was always just kind of being competitive in sports, but then even, even academic stuff or non-athletic stuff. So I just, I would say just a diversity of interests and just trying to be the best at any of them.
Did you have any siblings or were you the only child?
Yep, so I did. I had 2 younger sisters.
Okay. And what was like, what did they lean towards entrepreneurship or were they kind of like traditional 9 to 5, being in that household? And what kind of advice did they lean towards from you?
Well, I would say, I was able to give them advice, but they're both very distinct in terms of the paths that they went into. One is in the cosmetology. She does a great job, so she's kind of taking her personal interest and kind of put it towards that area. And then my other sister, she's in real estate, still does some corporate stuff as well, but she's growing her real estate empire right now. So, they kind of spawned from that entrepreneurial mindset too. We just all had different paths in terms of, timing and when we go about it.
All right, so leaning towards like graduation, did you know what you wanted to be then, and like what school did you attend?
Yep. So I attended Washington University in St. Louis. Growing up, I went between wanting to be an architect to wanting to be a lawyer to not really being sure going into college. The architect and the lawyer, they sounded good when I was in middle school, but architect, I had to realize that was more than using a protractor to draw floor plans. Being a lawyer, didn't really feel like studying a bunch of statutes and law books for several years. I like more of the representation in court and stuff I saw my dad do in court, but I didn't see him in law school. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't interested in law, so when I went to Washington University in St. Louis, marketing ended up growing on me. And to be honest, I knew I wanted to do marketing when I did an internship for a black-owned ad agency named Fuse Advertising, led by Clifford Franklin, his wife. There was a fraternity brother of mine that recommended me to get the internship, and that was when I knew I wanted to do marketing. So it was going to school at WashU, but then that internship that let me know what I wanted to do out of college.
So graduating from leaving college, what kind of jobs did you have to like take on early on? Because I'm always fascinated to see what entrepreneurs have now, but like the path to what they went through to get to where they are. And, a lot of times you may have to work certain jobs that you don't really like or that's not for you, but you do it just to get the experience and help you catapult you to the next level. Like, what were some of those jobs that you had like after college?
Yeah, and I could say it was a blessing because I started interning at Fuse Advertising the last semester of my senior year. And I was able to hit the ground running right into that job, once I graduated. So It was really a blessing because it's hard to go right into marketing jobs right out of college. A lot of times they try to pigeonhole you into sales jobs that aren't really marketing, but that's where you kind of got to start off at. To be able to have meaningful projects and a workload that they gave me right out of college at Fuse, I mean, it was huge. Not just that, being able to learn, directly under Clifford Franklin, who was, really a tone setter when you look at advertising, not just multicultural, but general marketing as well. So I was blessed to have that kind of position right out of college.
What would you say is like the biggest difference between, talking about, getting a position in marketing instead of sales? Like, what would you say is like the biggest difference between those two?
You get some room for creativity in sales, but for the most part, your creativity is going to be how you go about doing certain staples that are a part of sales. So, how you target your list, or, how you take people to lunch, or different tactics, you might have some room. In my opinion, the creativity in marketing, there's a lot more room for your creativity. There's a lot more room for campaigns. There's a lot more room for, doing research and pulling in the data and then being able to say, hey, I don't have to sell. Because let's be honest, a lot of sales is, the law of averages, the heavy volume, that type of approach. Not to say that that's all there is, but that was more of that. Marketing is a little bit more, I feel like there's more of an art to marketing. Still some science there, but more of an art. Versus sales, I feel like it's more of the science of averages, numbers, high volume, and then you expect this amount to come through.
From the learning under, you said Clifford Franklin,
Yeah.
What was some of the best advice that he gave you that helped you like moving forward in your career?
I say with Cliff, he gave me most of his advice through example. That was one of those to where, as a business owner now, 10 years in, there's things I appreciate from Cliff now that I couldn't appreciate as much when I was just a young guy coming out of college ready to take on the world. Certain things that, I liken it to, Mr. Miyagi kind of having Daniel-san waxing on and waxing off, and he's ready to learn the karate. Well, you don't understand, I'm already teaching you karate. I'm already teaching you things to apply. So with them, they were not only giving me, great meaningful work, but, I saw how hard he worked. I saw him one of the first ones in, last ones to leave, and I just saw him kind of how he just embraced the process of being the best at what he does. Nobody was thinking like him. Nobody was working as hard as him. The way he empowered, account executives like myself coming behind him. Not just that, him being a fraternity brother, you appreciate different things that people contribute to their fraternities. But when you can provide meaningful jobs, opportunities, and then be able to invest in the people behind it, that's tenfold, man. So a lot of what I learned from Cliff was just him watching him. Yeah, he gave me some nuggets directly, but a lot of it was just leadership by example, and I appreciate a lot of that more in hindsight.
Right. Do you do you feel like it helped greatly benefit you as well because he's somebody that coming from another black man? Not saying that other races don't give us great advice or help us with our careers, but when it's somebody that looks like us that knows what it's like to be a black man and building something, and he's giving you this type of advice, do you feel like that kind of also helped me greatly benefit you in the long run?
It did, man. Perspective is great, and when you look at certain common ground, it's not a slight to anyone else. The common ground is the common ground. So yes, being able to work for, a black business owner, but aside from that, somebody in the advertising and marketing space. Not just that, he ran the company. The principal founders of his company were his wife, Sherilyn Franklin, and his brother, Mike Franklin. Mm-hmm. I own my company with my wife. So it was being able to see what they were able to do. That nucleus, that core, had a great team of people working with and around them. But it was essentially that core, and I loved how, sometimes when you talk husband and wife, there can be this mom and pop stigma that you have to work through. Yeah. No, that's just a tight, cohesive nucleus. You can't pigeonhole it as mom and pop because they were literally doing, millions in billings and one of the most, widely recognized ad agencies in the country. So it was even before I knew what I was being prepared for. I was being prepared for it just from working under them, following them, and understanding that perspective.
So after that job, you ended up you took one other job before starting your own company?
So I took 3 other jobs. So once I left Fuse, I took a job in Chicago, a marketing coordinator job. It was a group that had never had a true marketing campaign behind it. They just had stuff that they sold, but it was a chance to really kind of come in and support that marketing department, build it from the ground up. Mm-hmm. And that was an interesting job because at the time I wanted a different challenge. I actually took around a $10K pay cut to take that job, but it was worth it because I felt like it was an opportunity to really build something from the ground up. And then from a perspective standpoint, I also didn't realize how good I had it at Fuse. I wanted a different challenge, but I still feel like you got to take control of your career,
right,
and just be real with different things. So I can be real enough to say, at Fuse, I underappreciated what they were, the opportunities they were giving me. At the same time, that next challenge, it really helped mold and prepare me. So I took that marketing coordinator role in Chicago. Then I moved to Atlanta, did a combination of freelance work and also working for Cisco, the technology company. After Cisco, I worked at iHigh, regional manager there for about 4 years, and then that was my last stop before starting SUV.
Mm-hmm. How important is it, as far as careers? Because I talk about this a lot, and it seems like a lot of entrepreneurs on their journey, they're from one place, but it's almost like you have to be willing to, travel and relocate. Like, how important do you think it is to kind of like relocate as far as like building your career, or is it necessary?
I think you got to size up your situation, size up the market that you're in. I like St. Louis as an area in terms of my hometown. I felt like for my hometown, I've always envisioned going and being able to build an amount of capital that allows me to come back and invest in the area I'm from. So for me, sizing up where I was from, my career path, and then what I saw in Atlanta, it made sense for me. I got, one of my closest colleagues is a guy named Barry Tyler. He's one of my frat brothers. He graduated about a year or 2 after me in high school. He stayed in Hammond and has been a tremendous resource for the city. So his path is a little bit different, even though he travels a lot to be able to get better at his craft and to bring stuff back. He's got a different role, but at the end of the day, our paths are merging together because the same capital and experiences that I'm trying to build outside of the area, I can come in and work with somebody that's really stayed and grown roots in that community throughout his professional career. So all of our paths are different. You got to size up what's best for the chess game you're playing.
Mm-hmm. And that we were talking about that earlier. That's been one of my biggest battles right now. Is I love home, man, but it's like sometimes I feel like in order to grow even more, I feel like I need to leave home. But I always said I want to stay home and build something for the people, something that's going to benefit people in the long run. But at the same time, it's like, am I really holding myself back, staying home? Yeah. So I feel like that's one of the biggest battles is, trying to balance it. When is it time to leave? And do you need to stay there for your people, to help them out in the long run?
Yep. And there's times where your physical presence might be home, but when you sometimes go away, and you set an example. You never know how many kids or other business owners or people you're inspiring. So you might not be in that market, but your presence is still there. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah, I have people now, like we saying, a lot of the stuff that we do now, we're not home a lot. Most of the time was like busy being on the road, but I was still like, one of my goals is to always, I want to have a studio called Across the Line Studio. I want to build it at home, but at times I feel like, do I need to, leave, build it somewhere else and bring it back home? It's just trying to find that balance of like, what's the next key? I feel like it's never gonna be a perfect time to do anything, but it's like I'm just trying to like balance. That's one of my biggest struggles though, just the home thing. I have a great support system, but it's like everything always works out in the long run. But I'm like, I don't know if I really, is it time for me to just finally leave, to build something else long term. So when you were at AHA, I know you were there, and I think that was the last job before you started your company. Can you talk a little bit about those lasting days at AHA and like how you knew like the writing was potentially on the wall for you to kind of like do your own thing?
Yeah, well, the good thing about AHA is that it allowed me to kind of help initiate a startup without having my own startup. They were, Lexington, Kentucky based, and I was responsible for, the Southeast region, specifically Atlanta area. And so with them being new, you literally had to build everything from the ground up, all of your initial contacts. Streaming was relatively new at the time, so it really required kind of putting your personal brand into it because streaming was new, the company was new. People were kind of investing in you and your ability to kind of come through with that. So I was great in that regard. Worked with it for 4 years, and a business lesson I learned is that as companies progress, their business model may progress. So once we built them to the point where they got a $12.5 million investment from Cox Media Group, they decided to make the shift to more of being driven by the technology versus the the in-person experience or the regional manager experience that you get from people like myself and those that were positioned around the country. So I saw the writing on the wall. The investment came, and they laid off every regional manager but me. And I want to say Thanksgiving. I want to say that was Thanksgiving of 2012. They laid off every regional manager but me. I had my business plan done by Christmas of that same year because I knew my time was coming.
Right.
So by the time they laid me off in June of 2013, I was just ready to go into, doing it for myself because AHA gave me a great perspective. But aside from that, I saw like a group of needs in the ecosystem that I felt like weren't being met. And so the goal was to create SUV to address those needs in a way that the past 4 years have kind of taught me.
What do you think made them hang on to you last before letting go? Like they let go everybody else. What do you think it was with you that let them hang on to you for, even though the writing was on the wall, why do you think they hung on to you so long as far as to start letting you go with everybody else?
I think it was strategic. I think in Atlanta, Cox Media Group was based in Atlanta. The company's biggest competitor was based in Atlanta. So I think it was one of those things to where let's make sure there's a little bit of training wheels on this next transition prior to, if we do that prematurely, then I don't think it's the best message to the group that just invested in us. So I think there was a little bit of a training wheels element to where we'll kind of leave them on for a certain amount of time. So I think that was a big part of it. When I look back at it, I can understand their rationale and kind of trimming the overhead from the regional manager position. But I think everybody was figuring the streaming landscape out at that time. So, I get their rationale, but I think they left me on longer from a strategic timing standpoint.
Should we, as people in general, you may love what you do, but should we always, work on, I guess, per se, like having like a backup plan or a business plan of our own? Yes, we're thankful for the jobs that we have, but anything can happen. You never know. One day you could be working there, and then the next day the company shut down or they let people go. Do you think it's a good idea for people to, invest in their own futures and create their own opportunities outside of, having their own jobs, which even if they do love it?
Definitely. I think you have to have pivot points. And I think sometimes people think it's starting your own large business or conglomerate or bust when there's a lot of different levels and variations. You know what I'm saying? So you might work for a company, but you might have a backup plan just in case you have to pivot and generate additional revenue streams, or in case a pandemic hits and everything is kind of shaking on its head. So I think the pandemic taught everybody you got to be able to have some pivot points, adjustments you can make, and like just different ways of doing things. Not to say it's totally eliminated, but I think the years of working 15, 20, 30 years for companies and just retiring, I think that's a thing of the past. You know, I think, you know, anybody that's doing that, I think that's an exception to the rule. So I think everybody has to think of different pivot points, and again, sizing up your path and what you want to do, because it might not be starting a full-fledged business. It might be more consulting and freelance that allows you to generate that revenue without maybe assuming full business overhead. So I just encourage everybody to keep the wheels turning, think outside of the box, and it's always better to overdo it on planning and pivoting beforehand versus having to move double time because you waited until the last minute.
Absolutely. So when the time came and they let you go, talk a little bit about those early days of SuvTV and how did you actually come up with the name?
So it was the name generated from the sports utility vehicle. My rationale was, you know, when you think SUVs, some people get them because they want the space to tow stuff. Some people want cargo. Some people wanted to transport kids. Some people just like the look. I wanted to create a business that had a similar niche in the sports space. Some use us to broadcast. Some use us to leverage my sports marketing expertise. Some use it just for special projects that you might not be able to put in a box, but they're related to sports and the ecosystem. So SUV was kind of like that general concept that encompassed it all. There was enough specialty to be able to, you know, leverage the expertise, but enough fluidity to where, we're not just pigeonholed into, we just produce events or we just do marketing. No, we do it all because I think the fusion is what makes the business and the ecosystem thrive.
Was it hard to get things going early on, or did you just take those contacts that you have from AHA to help you transition your business? Was it easy in those early days, or was it still kind of hard, you know?
It was a process. The only thing I say made it relatively easier is that, you know, being younger and being at that age and being able to kind of see streaming grow, I just really enjoy seeing the streaming industry grow, and it was fun being a part of that. So even though there was some, you know, early growing pains and there was a transition when you're going from, you know, being paid a salary in that company to now you have to start from the ground up, you have to generate revenue streams. Because at the time, you know, all streaming was pretty much free in terms of the high school grassroots space. Most people were using free platforms to stream. And there were a couple platforms that were charging, but it was so relatively new, even they weren't hitting critical mass. So there was a transition in going from people expecting free streaming to now you have to build in enough of a value proposition to be able to charge money, but not do it at the detriment of your relationships. If you just jump from what it was to, okay, now there's a charge for it, you got to be able to factor in some transition and some build up. So being able to navigate that was a challenge early on.
Yeah. So in the beginning, you were saying like some of those events you had to do for free to kind of like show people like this is the work that you can do and put out before you can start inputting those fees and everything.
So the way I saw it, I had to do that. One, there's a proof of concept. You do have to kind of show people, what they're getting. But aside from that, my competitors were larger and more venture capital backed to where they could be a little bit more focused on the bottom line than I could be. You might look at it the other way around. You might say, well, if you were smaller, it seemed like revenue would mean more to you. Not necessarily, because for me, the importance of brand, but also running the marathon versus the sprint, it makes a big difference. You know, part of why we've been able to last, grow, and scale over the past several years was times where we did stuff that the balance sheet might not have supported. You know, if you were just looking at the bottom line, but brand is a very powerful thing. And that was something that we were able to build. So even if you look back and you say, okay, hey, we may have overspent there, maybe we overdid there, without charging the revenue, it's all a balance in that. You know, it's not a 2, 3, 4 year race. Over 10 years, we've been able to make adjustments, but I think the way we hit the ground running in our early years, it made a big difference.
So also, it seems like they can kind of, in a sense, work to your advantage as well, like you're saying, not having the backing of like those bigger companies like they have. They can kind of rest on their laurels knowing that they got money coming in. So for you, it's like, you betting on yourself. You feel like that worked to your advantage as well, knowing that you had to make everything count when you were just going out here putting in the work?
Definitely. I think, you have to have the perfect balance of knowing when to study business, study best practices, and not just be so, strong-headed that you're not balanced. But you got to know there's a lot of it factor and a lot of just refusing to be denied that is there in entrepreneurship. And I don't care whether you're talking, the Byron Allens of the world, the Steve Jobs, the McDonald's brothers, etc. There were certain things to where They just had a system and they stuck to it. And I think that that's a big part of, entrepreneurship. Having that perfect balance of knowing you don't know it all, but what you know, lock in on that.
A lot of times we like to talk about, when you're building a business or something or anything like that, you want that support, like as far as family and friends. A lot of times people from your area might not support it as much as you would like them to. How did you feel like when you started your business? Did you feel like you had the support of people back home?
I feel like there were different layers of support. I feel like my family supported me early on because they're always going to support me.
Mm-hmm.
Did they necessarily understand the vision? Maybe, maybe not.
Right.
But that's not a derogatory thing because I was so focused on, I'm not trying to lay out where I'm trying to go. I'm just trying to go there. You'll see over time. But my family is a very supportive family. We mentioned the entrepreneurial, spirit of the household I grew up in. Aside from that, my grandparents were entrepreneurs. Owned a family store. Owned apartments, did different things. So, entrepreneurship and things like that is kind of like an expectation. So when I chose to go my own path, they supported me. As far as the layers of support from your community, you got to know when to appreciate support, but don't expect it or be fueled by it, because there's different factors. Some people want to support it, but they got to face their own thing in terms of them not being able to take a step and take the risk that you take. So when you do it and you succeed at it, that applause might not be as high as it should because they got to face some of their own things.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And you're not doing it to rub anything in their face, but you got to know that sometimes the applause won't match the merit of what you're doing, and that's okay.
Right.
Because you're not doing it for that anyway. So I feel like any entrepreneur, you're going to hit that time where it's like, man, I hit that milestone. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. It don't seem like some of the support is matching what I'm doing.
Right.
And you notice it even if you're not driven by that. So just know that's what it is. And really, if you got the right mindset, that becomes fuel too.
Absolutely. Do you feel like you could have built something like this to sustain in your hometown, or was it just necessary for you to come to Atlanta and build it?
I think it was necessary. I think the Atlanta market, the Atlanta market is the only market that could pull me from the Midwest. Growing up in Indiana, being close to Chicago, going to college in St. Louis, Atlanta is what really grew me because I look at it really drew me because when I look at the amount of corporate headquarters here, I looked at the amount of independent projects and just the entrepreneurial vibe. You look at the sports that are here, everything from pro down to the high school and grassroots level and the talent. You look at its proximity to Charlotte, Orlando, Nashville, so Atlanta I feel like was very strategic. There's a purpose down here. I met my wife down here, so I don't think that my life would be the same if it wasn't for Atlanta. All the way around to how Atlanta, I feel like how they influenced some of the election decisions over the past few years. I think that there's just a purpose in Atlanta that I don't think would have been back home, and I appreciate home for the roots, but Atlanta gave me wings that are going to allow me to go back home with a much different, Teddy Roosevelt, I like his quote, walk softly and carry a big stick. I'm going to go back home with a much bigger stick thanks to Atlanta. So I think that makes a big difference, and there's a lot of purpose in Atlanta.
What is it like now when you go back home? Do they still look at you just as Marques is from here, or do you look at you as like Marques, he's built this big successful brand? Like, how do they look at you when you go back home? And do they expect like any kind of like handouts or anything when you go back home?
Well, I think it's just all love, genuine love when we see people, and I think there's enough balance to recognize people's accomplishments, but if they're the right people, you still just see them as Marques. I still just see them as, Barry Tyler, who I say is doing great things. Yeah, he's gonna be a mayor of Hammond one day. He's doing these various things at different levels, but he's still Barry. So I think there's a balance of recognizing your people's accomplishments and being happy for them. And that's what I love about social. We talked about the gift and the curse. There are guys that the extent of me growing up with them was us playing Little League against each other, and you know what I'm saying, and them getting me for some losses that I still want to avenge to this day if I ever see them on a diamond. But getting messages from those type of guys is like, man, I see what you're doing. Keep doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, to where there's a balance in being proud of your accomplishments and being driven, but not getting a big head like, drinking your own Kool-Aid. At the end of the day, we all came from the same city, and so you appreciate the genuine love, but it's always an element of, I'm still Marques Burnett, grew up on Eve Street.
Absolutely. Is it hard for you, building a business, not to be so hands-on with everything? Because, of course, it's your brand, it's your name. You got to put your stamp on it. Is it hard for you to not be so hands-on and, oversee everything?
It's extremely hard.
Yeah.
Because it's that balance of scale and being smart and then, standing behind your brand and wanting things to be a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
You hear me leverage the McDonald's brothers a lot. Part of why Ray Kroc was able to kind of steal their company from them is because they didn't balance enough of, okay, we've done it this way, but now there's a sea of scale out there. We don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater to say, okay, how can we be a little bit more aggressive? How can we maybe create a model that focuses less on these hand-driven details that we've done? So I try to find that balance of, being true to the brand because, Chick-fil-A, one of the strongest brands out there.
Right.
If we say we're closed on Sunday, we're closed on Sunday. You know what I mean? People have probably told them, hey, here are the margins you're missing out on, and you can be doing this. Yeah, sounds good, bro. We're closed on Sunday. Yep. So I think it's that balance of knowing when to stick to your guns and knowing when to say, hey, as we work smarter, not harder. Mm-hmm. But that's part of the fun of it, man.
Right. And talk a little bit about that. Have you had moments where you looked at it from a financial standpoint, like this may be a good idea, but you just had to turn it down? Have you had those moments where you just had to, maybe it wasn't a good move at the time, where you had to just turn certain business deals down?
Definitely, because I think there's a combination of when you're a black business owner, you always have to weigh what looks good in terms of a sum that's relative and what looks good over the bigger span of time. I listen to Nipsey Hussle's music some, but when he was, kind of taken away from us, man, I really started digging into Nipsey's approach. I was asleep. I knew some of his tracks, but I had no idea his impact as an entrepreneur, a businessman, an icon, and just he was like, I don't look at myself as a rapper. I started treating myself like a brand. He talked about some of the best brands. They've got kind of like a brand guidebook that, so the way I see it, I'm not going to look at revenue and look at certain things as just a streaming company. SuvTV is a brand, so I got to treat it as such. So a deal that might make sense for you because you're just looking at those numbers, I'm good. Nipsey could have sold, way more in revenue. No, I'm going to get what he did, 100 copies at $1,000 a piece.
1,000, was it 1,000 at 100? I think he was selling them for 100, something like that.
I think it was 100 copies. I think 1,000 a piece.
Something
I think
that.
so. But it was, he could have definitely done more units and did more volume in sales. But he was on a totally different brand footprint, so he wasn't looking at just the quantity there. I think quality over time, it ends up to more quantity than just taking those deals that just look good because of the sticker price. So I think you got to always weigh each case by case scenario, but don't go for the checkers over the chest.
Do you think that's what hurts a lot of black-owned business? We may look at that figure and just bite on it as opposed to understanding the long-term effects of it. Do you think that's how a lot of black-owned businesses end up at times being taken advantage of because we're just focusing on that dollar sign?
Yeah, I think some do fall into that category, and I think the good thing about today, and it's kind of like a bad thing about today too, the good thing is in life, you're going to always be given the total book of work or the total time to see how a game plays out. So if a 4-quarter game, you're going to be able to play the 4 quarters out and see what happened. Mm-hmm. But in today's society, if you didn't call that timeout or you missed that shot in the first quarter that the peanut gallery thought you should have made, by the time the second quarter hit, they saying the coach need to lose his job, this what you need to be doing, he's a bum, this and that. When meanwhile, the vets, they already know we're going to see the data, we're going to see what's going on, and by the time the 4th quarter ends, we're going to win the game. So I think there are some business owners that take the duck deal, not realizing that, hey, that might be, I might be cutting my nose off to spite my face, and that's not better in the long run. Mm-hmm. Some fall into that category, and then there are some that take a deal that you from the outside might say is a bad deal, but they're already sizing up factors and determinants that you're not even aware of. And they're okay with you talking trash in quarter one because they already know it's pros. That's what the crowd's going to do. 4th quarter, we're going to be the one hoisting the trophy. So I think, again, it's that you always hear me say it's case specific. Some take deals that they shouldn't take because they don't know their worth or they don't play chess. And some, you got to kind of stand on your own thing because the crowd going to always give their hot takes. So
all the time.
So you got to kind of be committed to knowing, hey, I'm the only one in this. Me and my team, I'm going to do what's best for my team.
And a lot of times, I think a lot of black-owned businesses can't get the funding they need to sustain as well. So they feel like they, in order to, provide for themselves and for the people on their staff, like they have to take this money, knowing it may not be the best thing for them. And when you're talking about your work, at what point in business did you finally feel like, okay, I know my worth, like this is not the right deal for me? Like, what point did you feel like, okay, this brand is built to sustain, and like you actually like knew like the value of like the SuvTV?
I mean, it might sound cliche, man, but I knew it from day one. And I think because of, the iHigh years were very instrumental, but I think in playing the role that I did to help build that company, which was a great company founded by some great people, and I was able to learn under, I learned under Cliff Franklin, but I was also able to learn under Jim Host, who was chairman of iHigh. But aside from that, Jim Host shaped the NCAA Final Four, the big Pizza Hut promotion, with the little basketball, and like he was just a trailblazer when it comes to that space. Being able to learn under guys like that, I saw enough in the 10, 15 years leading up to when we started the company, and knew enough about the road ahead to where I knew we were valuable. I knew nobody would be able to align certain things the way we were. And it's not to pat our own back, but it's just because of the knowledge I was blessed to be able to learn under some great leaders, and then being able to cut my teeth with work that I had done. So I knew we would have staying power, because certain things, you can throw millions at it. You're still not going to be able to do it like certain individuals that have a certain intelligence, but aside from that, a commitment to refusing to be outworked or outlasted.
Absolutely. Did you know back then, just talk about about your mindset. Back then, was it more about, hey, I'm just going to take these jobs to, get a certain level of position and build my wealth at this time? Or did you already know, like, these opportunities that I'm having now are going to benefit me in the long run to do what I want to do? Like, what was your mindset back then? Was it more about just making a living to sustain and get a higher position? Or was it always like, I'm going to take this, but I know it's going to benefit me in the long run to build my own business?
I never really thought about building even growing up in an entrepreneurial household, it was always like, it's kind of like I took an entrepreneurial approach to the jobs that I worked, to where I wasn't really a 9-to-5er. I might be in at 7:30 and I might be out by 3:30, because it's less about what my day looks like, because sometimes I might stay there all day. I just wanted to be the best I could be. Aside from that, I want whatever company I'm a part of, I want them to be better off than before I started. I mentioned that job where I went from Fuse to that job in Chicago. I took the pay cut because for me, I really just loved the opportunity to kind of join and do something that they hadn't done before. So I loved the challenge, and this was before I was thinking, okay, this is going to be valuable towards when I start my own. No, it was just kind of like, I got this job, I'm going to knock it out of the park, to a point where before I moved to Atlanta, in less than a year, I earned a raise that was going to allow me to make more than my first job and then some. But by that time, I'd already generated enough business in Atlanta, and I just felt a call into Atlanta. So I left the raise on the table to make that move. When you think about it, if I was just thinking my own business, I probably would have stayed up there in Chicago, been able to make the extra money, and then be able to put a little nest egg aside to be able to start my business. But I wasn't even thinking my own business then. I was just taking on these positions with the goal of, by the time I hang my jersey up at this company, I want them to feel like, man, this, and this was done. There was a presence there. There was an impact there.
When you talk about, taking that pay cut, it made me, I spoke about this before, it made me think about the time when I graduated from college and I took a job at a radio station. And it was driving from my house to Greenville. It was like an hour away, and they only paid me $10 an hour. But I knew I was worth more than just $10 an hour, but I took it because I wanted that experience and just trying to get a foot in the door. And then when I look back on it now, it's like I took that, what I learned from them, like editing audio, I took it and turned it into what I'm doing now. Because before then, I didn't know what to do. I was just, just talking, and just everything that I would do, I would just record and just put it out, no editing or anything. But the radio station, it taught me a lot about, editing audio, running like a full production show. So I used that experience to help me transition. But at the time, it was just like, man, I needed the money. I needed money to help me like sustain and pay for student loans and everything like that. But long term, when you think long term, it's like, man, it really was worth it, to do what I was doing at the time. But at the time, it's hard because I think we can get caught up in, the potential of like living right now and trying to work and pay bills instead of thinking like long term, like how is this opportunity going to greatly benefit us in the long run.
Facts, bro. And then I think God has a big impact too. I'm not really a very religious person. I'm a spiritual person. I know God's impact though. He'll have you in situations and doing things to where even if you're not seeing how the chess pieces are playing, like, you had a good understanding. I think you were kind of saying, hey, I'm going to leverage this, even though it's not as much, pay isn't what I might want, but I'm going to leverage this. So you were already kind of thinking that. He had me in certain positions where I wasn't even already connecting the dots, but he was already kind of connecting them for me. And I think there's always a little bit of that in there. Really, there's always a lot of that in there too. So I think, you can't underestimate the power of that, man.
Absolutely. I want to go back a couple of years and we'll talk about 2020 when the pandemic hit. How did that affect your business? Because you do a lot of sports coverage, so at the time everything was shut down. So like, how did that time affect you and your business?
Man, there was some times because it was like, everybody was kind of touching base and kind of saying, hey, you guys gonna be okay, and I was like, yeah, we're gonna be okay. But at the same time, I knew it was gonna be I liken it to a guy that takes a big hit. He might go down to his knee and he say, yeah, I'm good, but yeah, I kind of need this knee. Like, give me a second to get my wind back.
Right.
It was that kind of thing when you look at all sports just completely shut down, So that was a challenge, but it was kind of one of those things with it being such a severe scenario. Yeah, you were worried about your business, but you were worried about the country. You know what I'm saying? And really, my thoughts kind of went to people to where I knew our business would be fine. I'm kind of worried about those who are in tougher situations. So I kind of felt it firsthand. All right, there's going to be some adjustments. This is 3, 4, whoever knows how many months of contracts and business and events that we won't be able to do. But I knew we would be fine because really the way I saw it, there's more grave concerns right now with lives being affected. But secondly, once sports do come back, the value of the stream
is going to go way up.
It's gonna go way up. So it's one of those things to where, yeah, it was still a challenge, and you just go, one of my best friends, he lost his father within the first couple weeks. So it was one of those things where I knew the business would be fine, but it was just the lives impacted, man, and just like, man, what is going on? Never seeing something like that before.
Yeah, it was like everything shut down. Like we were still working because they deemed us at our job as essential workers. So we still work. But as far as the podcast, we really, traveling wise, we did a few here and there, but not a whole lot because people were just still unsure of like what's going on. What is this? But like you said, when people were finally ready to get back out and do things like that, everything just like it went back up. Where were you at the time though? Because I want to ask you about as far as like the George Floyd situation and, as far as the protesting and everything. Were you for, and when you saw the players protesting and debating whether they wanted to come back and play, you knew that was going to have a large effect on all sports overall. Where were you at that point about as far as like the protesting where guys wanted to play and not want to play? Because, of course, this is how you build your brand. You cover sports. So were you like in line with the players as far as like not playing because of the George Floyd situation, or were you kind of like in that space where like you were kind of wanting them to get back so everything can kind of get back to normal?
I guess I respected both sides. I respected the players that say, hey, I'm going to use my voice to not play. I respect the players that say, hey, I'm going to play because I feel like I help the cause better by playing, be it collecting my check that allows me to support my family and the other businesses and people that I'm supporting, or be it, hey, if people are going to be all tuned in on us, then that becomes a bigger platform to kind of, say our messages and make our stance that way. So I respected both sides. I guess for me, I look at how people respond in the times right after something, but I'm more of I would rather see how you respond 5-6 months from then.
Right.
On an ongoing basis, because I think one thing the George Floyd scenario showed us is some of the responses were justified. That was appalling. Like there had to be a reaction. But I think we've also seen some statements, and let's call it what it is. We've seen a lot of cap that took place right after that, where the efforts aren't sustained after that.
Right.
Where we saw some people leverage responses to that to get woke points, and then we didn't see the stuff.
And then it just goes back to normal
exactly,
again.
It just goes right back to
Even
normal.
major corporations were doing the same
Most
thing.
definitely. So it's one of those things where I respect how people chose to handle it around that time. But again, I'm not looking to judge, but I'm not moved by social media responses to stuff.
Right.
I'm not discounting them. I'm not against them. Nothing like that. But there's this false stigma that if it's not said on social, it's not happening. When really some of the biggest doers are people that you don't see doing anything on social. I don't know Ward Dunn, but it seems like every time I look up or just the history of what I've seen from Ward Dunn, he's building houses.
Doing something in the community.
He's impacting families. He's doing something in the community. He probably doesn't even have a social media account. He's probably got people that try to set up, probably ran away from it. So, well done is better than well said.
Right. And I feel like that's the easy thing for do is these coaches or these major corporations to just put out a easy statement and just that's it. Like it's like showing that you care, but it's really more to it than just putting out these type of statements. Because like you said, when they put these statements out and then 4 or 5 months down the line, the same thing's happening again and everything is like back to normal. That's the easiest thing. I think being more active in the community and making these statements and doing the work instead of just putting out a little statement, it greatly benefits those as well. But it's like a lot of times in the media, it's like they almost, because these coaches, they make their money off of the black athlete. So it's easy so I think if they do more action instead of just putting out statements, it helps the cause even more. But I was definitely aligned with that's why I wanted to ask you that, because I knew it was put you guys in a tough spot, because that's how you make your money and that's how you support yourself and the people around you, getting back to sports. But at the same time, it's like the cause is more important than playing the sport at that time.
Cause more important, and then really our gear shifted towards whether your coach is evaluating, whether your players trying to play for opportunities. Our gears turned towards, all right, they're going to be behind the 8 ball in certain areas because coaches can get out and evaluate, players can get out and play and do different things. Like really, how can we offset some of the challenges that our ecosystem is going to face off of this? So how can we be ready to stream so that coaches can't come out? We can make sure we're streaming it to the coaches. There's a group called Next Play 360. It's actually run by Scooter Henderson's family. Okay. The Hendersons are such a great family because before Scooter was had even made the G League decision, they were using Next Play 360 to make sure players were able to still get that work in, and that's all the way from the Scooters, the Sharif Coopers, the Colin Sextons, the guys with NBA, in their future and in their present, all the way down to kids that just trying to make their high school team and needed to work. So I mean, they were just a huge outlet for the community. So I just applaud the efforts of those to where as soon as pandemic hit, their mind shifted towards what can we do to help, be it food drives, be it, a safe place to, still make sure you're following certain medical standards, but just being able to kind of help the ecosystem get through a tough time and respond to that tough time.
Absolutely. A few more questions and we'll get ready to wrap it up. We speaking earlier before we started this interview, you talk about a lot of the moves. It seems like you're so far ahead of like you're playing chess already. What's next for SuvTV, if you can share it?
I would say continuing to stay true to our brand principles in a streaming industry that I think now is more focused on microwave, high volume, everything's exponential to the point where how many paywall streams do you see out there? How many high school grassroots streaming has bots now? To where they're putting out fake high school streams with a fake link. You got people clicking on it and doing
all the time. Yeah,
we got that in high school now. They used to be something that used to be reserved for a Super Bowl, an NBA playoff game, a college game. Now we got that in high school grassroots. So in a space where you got streaming bots and a bunch of quick microwave tactics, you got NIL and different things that are good. But a lot of times it's used as a carrot on a stick to, I think, take the focus away from more important principles at the high school grassroots way. How do we balance the growth and some of the new frontiers? We're not losing sight of some of the principles that I think are very key when you start talking high school grassroots and stuff that feeds up to the pro level. So for us, it's continuing to broadcast quality, But aside from that, be there for the ecosystem beyond just our broadcast, because everything from mental health to career opportunities beyond playing, and also being able to manage your circle tightly. There's a overwhelming wealth of needs beyond just what we broadcast and the content we put out. So continuing to grow in that facet.
Absolutely. I went back and watched, as we wind this interview down, I went back and watched like this clip that we had from the first interview, and we were talking about NBA Mount Rushmore. And I got to go back and change one of the players on my Mount Rushmore, because at the time I said Bill Russell, Magic Johnson, LeBron, and Allen Iverson. So going back, watching Last Dance with Michael Jordan, I got to go back and I want to go back and say this on camera. I'm gonna go back and take Magic off my list, and I'm gonna put Jordan on there. Cause I was born in '92, so I didn't really understand like the impact that Jordan had on the league. I know Magic came before Jordan, but the impact, and you seen like how he just changed the culture. Jordan was just the icon, the guy, even the shoes and everything. When you look at that in totality, I didn't understand that at the time, but when I watched The Last Dance, I was like, okay, Jordan. I mean, I knew, because everybody, when you talk about the best player, it's always opinionated. Some people gonna say Jordan, LeBron, Kobe, Kareem, anybody. But when you look at the impact that Jordan had from that documentary, I don't think we've ever had a player in the league that was like a icon like Jordan.
Yeah.
So I want to know what you thought about me, going back and making amends on that.
No doubt, man. You know what I'm saying? I didn't hold it against you when you did it, but I acknowledge my bias because, again, I told you how close Northwest Indiana was to Chicago. Up in that country, we didn't root for the Pacers. Reggie cool and all, but yeah, we're 30 minutes from Chicago, bro. So right. I was born in '83. You look at that stretch when I grew up in Indiana, so all of those, both Bulls repeats. I'm in that market,
right.
So how we look at Jordan and how, to even now when I see Chicago, it's still that's Jordan, even though he owns a totally different franchise in a totally different city. So
right.
I think that documentary did a great job of walking guys through that, and I think that's what's fun about sports, being able to look at different perspectives, talk through different things, and and just being able to compare different viewpoints.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think going back looking at it's like I don't have that emotional attachment because I wasn't really there to actually watch it on TV and actually see it. I feel like it's more like when you actually get a chance to sit down and watch these guys, even if you don't go to the games, but you grow up watching these players, and you kind of have you have an attachment to them because you see them, the growth they have over all these years. So for me, I didn't really have that emotional attachment to Jordan. But even when I talk to older people, when they just talk about Jordan, man, nobody could see Mike on the court at all. Even if you watch interviews now with former players, they man, Jordan was just nobody could. It was he was just so far ahead of everybody else. And even Charles Barkley, I remember him on I think he was on the Pivot podcast. And he was that was one of the first times that he actually felt like there was a guy in the league that was better than him when he was talking about Michael Jordan. But for me, I grew up in Kobe is my all-time favorite player. So, I don't have him on my Mount Rushmore, but I do have LeBron on there. And I still say Iverson because, to me, Iverson was the guy, a cultural icon as far as, embracing hip-hop with the cornrows and the tattoos and everything like that. And eventually they stopped letting the guys wear, chains and all that stuff to the game. But to me, I still have Iverson on there regardless because, to me, he was just even though I don't think he was better than any of those guys, and not Kobe either, I just felt like the impact he had overall as a culture, that's why I had
see waves of his impact in today's game with certain things that the NBA lets them do. And I think the NBA has done as good a job as any league in terms of over time, not being so antiquated that they can't kind of be true to the culture of the guys that drive the game. And I think you got to give credit to the NBPA and the guys that kind of head that up because, that segue doesn't happen without those guys being the type of guys that they are. So, even if you give the Stearns and the Silvers credit, the NBPA does a great job.
Absolutely. I know we gotta get ready to wrap it up, but I'm gonna put you out there, put your feet to the fire real quick. I know you're an NBA guy. If you had to make a prediction, who would you say is in the finals and who will win it all?
Finals. I'm going to go. Man, that's a good one. Finals out of the West. Man, that's a good one. Out of the West, I'm gonna go.
I think I'm going Golden State. Well, I am going. Assuming
Yeah,
everybody stay healthy, I think with Golden State bringing everybody back and then getting Wiseman back in the paint, and you still got Jordan Poole, even though he can jack up some shots at times, he can still hoop though. But
he can go, man. I'm going Golden State versus, and really my wheels are turning on the East. Golden State, I just got them grayed in out of the West. So yeah, I'm going Golden State, and I think I'm gonna go. Man, it was funny because before with Udoka not coaching now,
they made some good moves. Yeah,
they made some good moves. It's between Celtics and Bucks. I think I'm gonna go Celtics
in the finals.
Even with the coaching change, I think I'm gonna go Celtics. And some of this is, I believe, Tatum learned a lot from last year, in addition to being a good player. And Jaylen Brown had a great finals last year, and he's a player. Some players play better with a little chip, and I think there's a chip that he's gonna use going into this year. So I like the Celtics. Not to mention Malcolm Brogdon, another Atlanta area guy who I think is gonna be. You talk point guard. He's gonna be a nice little point guard addition.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be Golden State bringing everybody back. You get Wiseman back. I think that's gonna help them out tremendously. And then out the East, like I said, the East is tough. I'll probably say Milwaukee again. I think them keeping their main core together. It's just something.
And Middleton will be back.
Middleton will be back healthy. Yeah. I like them over Brooklyn, over Boston. Brooklyn, they got talent, but it just I feel like they just got too much. The chemistry. So I'm gonna say Golden State and Milwaukee. I think Golden State gonna repeat though. So everybody healthy.
Because Clay wasn't even 100%.
He wasn't.
But that's the thing. Clay at 80 is still pretty good. But like 100% Clay.
And you still gotta respect him as a shooter, regardless.
You have to.
Anytime.
You have to. Not to mention how he defends.
Yep.
And, Clay can go, man.
Yeah. So I got Golden State and Milwaukee, and then I got Golden State winning it all again. What advice would you give for someone pursuing their dreams? They may not want to be, they might not want to have their own company, production company, or whatever it is. Like they may have a different idea of what they want to do in life. Like, what advice would you have for someone that wants to pursue their dream?
I would say refuse to be denied and be willing to adapt. Mm-hmm. That covers everything. Because the willingness to adapt is going to make it to where, like I said, sometimes you got to stick to your guns and just know what you know. But that don't mean you're reckless and you're not always studying to get better, studying what works best, doing your homework, challenging yourself. So that's part of that, being willing to adapt. If you're not even doing that, you're not going to be willing to adapt because you don't even know what to adapt to because you're not doing homework. But aside from that, even there are some that do homework. They're online. They're doing things. They're attending stuff. But they're not really willing to go after it. Their refusal to be denied isn't there. So I think if you can do those two things, is that an exhaustive list? No, but that covers everything that you need to be able to do, because when you do it, there's going to be people that's going to tell you can't do it. There's going to be people that say, but they already doing this. There's going to be people that if it doesn't go as well as you want to do right out of the gate, they're looking at you sideways and trying to deter you. So you just got to have a refusal to be denied, and you got to always be sharp and be better at your craft. So always be willing to adapt. All the great companies are doing it. Netflix went to a subscription model to where they're going to be going to an advertising revenue-based option sooner or later. Disney has adjusted things. So all of the great companies know how to adapt.
Absolutely. Then my final two questions. If you could go back and talk to your younger self, give your younger self some advice, what would you tell yourself, the younger Marques?
I would say, I would definitely say to myself when I was at Fuse Advertising, I would say, appreciate what's going on right now. You really don't realize how good you have it. Because at that time, even though I was getting good work and doing different things, it was still just, I think there was a little bit of entitlement there. I went to a very great school, and even though they were giving me a great opportunity, it was just still a little bit of, I just got to be entitled to a little something different. When having started a company for myself, man, the best thing you can get from a great company and a great leader is meaningful work, because what that says is they trust you with the ball in your hands. Yeah. A ball that they put blood, sweat, and tears into. If they put that ball in your hands, that in and of itself is an accomplishment. So I would tell my younger self to appreciate that. But hindsight is 20/20. You just got to be able to make sure you're looking back, because nobody is perfect. Even if I would have done that differently, I would still look back on, okay, I could have done these 5 or 6 things differently. So just make sure you're taking that look back.
Absolutely. And then my last and final question. This is the Cross the Line Podcast Self-Investment Tour. So I like to ask everybody at the end, what does self-investment mean to you?
To me, self-investment means making sure you put everything that you possibly can into yourself to get the return that you're looking for. Everybody has goals and what they want to do. Not too many people are going to do what I saw you do in terms of, hey man, this is what I want to do. I want to create this podcast. I want to interview business owners. I want to go to multiple cities. Everything you told me you wanted to do, you did. You sacrificed. You made it happen. You tried this. You saw if that worked. You took notes along the way. You improved it along the way. So when I look at self-investment, it's not just saying, hey, I want to get this return. This is what I want to build. It's exhausting yourself, making sure you're putting everything that's possible into it to make that come to fruition.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, Marcus. Before we get out of here, I want to thank you, man. I also got you a gift. I know we got to wrap it up. I got you a gift real quick, man. I've been meaning to get this to you for a while, but this is a copy of my book. I already signed it for you.
I was just about to say,
yes,
you got to get you a pen. You got to sign it.
I already signed it for you,
sir.
man. But I appreciate you for, like I said, you always took me under your wing. You embraced me. Took me around with you, man. Like the first time I ever went to Florida, it was with you guys when we did we were in Niceville, Florida. This was about 3-4 years ago.
EC16.
Yep. And I was there, and I appreciate you for that, man, because it gave me my first. I always said I wanted to go to Florida, and then that was the first time I ever went to Florida. So I appreciate you for that. But you've always been so supportive of me ever since we met, and it's crazy to believe it's been 7 years already. That's why I'm like, man, I was fresh out of college still. I mean, I'm still learning now, but, for that brotherhood and that friendship to continue this long, man, I really do appreciate you.
Likewise, bro. I appreciate you. And another advice I would give young people and entrepreneurs, man, keep good energy, good vibe people around you. Sometimes there'll be times where obviously you're a good business mind, you're an entrepreneur, you're doing great things. But there are times where people can check those boxes and not necessarily be good people. Mm-hmm. Good energy people, man. Hold on to them, man. Hold on to them. Support them.
Absolutely. Relationships will take you a long way, way further than money will. Yep. But before we get out of here, Marcus, can you tell everyone how to find you and your business on social media?
Yep. So we're on Twitter at SuvTV, on Instagram at SUV.TV.
Absolutely. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Took a lot of these things away and used it to fulfill your dreams. So until next time, this is Cross the Line Podcast, Self-Investment Tour. Keep chasing your dreams. Thank you for listening.
It's Marques Burnett. You're watching the Cross the Lines Podcast.